You're listening to the Fan to Fan Podcast, and on this episode, we're talking about David Eggers' Nosferatu. Here we go. Welcome to the Fan to Fan Podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Brittany Gonzalez. With me, as always, fellow co-host Pete Charwino. We have returning guest, Fan to Fan All-Star Michele Brittany. One L in Michelle, two T's in Brittany. Michele Brittany has been kind enough to join us on a number of different episodes where we've talked about James Bond, Highlander, mummies, horror in space, which happens to be one of the collections that she's edited. And we've talked about her love of silent films. A lot of these films which happen to be lost. They're lost in time, and because of bad preservation, catastrophe, and other events, these movies are lost to us. One of the few movies that still exists for a number of different reasons, and we discussed it, is F.W. Murnau's 1922 masterpiece, Nosferatu. And we devoted a whole episode to that, where Michele, Pete, and I sunk our teeth into that dark corner, that haunting legacy of the 1922 Nosferatu, the eerily silent film that essentially defined really what cinematic horror has become. The part of kind of tracing the DNA back with its designs, its composition, its lighting, and obviously Max Schreck's very, very unforgettable portrayal as Count Orlok. And then in another episode, we ventured a bit more into the future from 1922 to 1979. And we talked about Werner Herzog's reinterpretation of Nosferatu the Vampire, where Klaus Kinski played more of a tortured Count Orlok and brought more tragedy and beauty and tapping into Werner Herzog's love for the original 1922 movie, all against the European backdrop and dripping with all this existential dread. So each version about something unique. To Nosferatu. Sometimes Nosferatu was more raw or primal, maybe more well-spoken, not Bela Lugosi Dracula, well-spoken and charming and gentlemanly, but with every director who's taken on Nosferatu, it seems like they've put their stamp on it. Herzog, you get a little melancholy, you get some poetry, you get some opera. 1922, Murnau, you get German Expressionism, and obviously there's a whole thing about the legal battle with the Stoker estate, having mentioned Dracula. Check out that episode and hear about that. But in this episode, here we are going to go right back into the crypt. This time, Robert Eggers at the helm of this adaptation of Nosferatu. I'm sure we'll get into it. And Pete, since you've seen this movie, it was a fairly highly anticipated adaptation of Nosferatu. Eggers obviously known for The Witch and The Lighthouse. No stranger to atmospheric horror. Very much his work steeped in history and folklore purposely. Why do Nosferatu? I think we're going to probably find, like Herzog, he has a love for it. But again, like with every version that we've discussed and kind of reviewed and analyzed, it has the stamp of that specific director. And what new horrors, what new humanity is going to be uncovered? Michele, what do you think?
It'll be interesting now that we've gone through a pandemic that has been global. What is Dracula going to represent in the 2024 version? How does he change the time as well? I think both those characters are going to be very fascinating in Eggers' version.
Nosferatu is here.
His pull to me is so powerful. I felt him crawling like a serpent in my body. You could never please me as he could.
Nosferatu, rated R, only Peter's Christmas Day. Special engagements.
Pete, since you are the lone person that has seen the Robert Eggers 2024
weight on my shoulders here now.
That's right. Everything is on your shoulders here. It's probably fair to say Eggers is in a cinematic landscape where, and Pete, we've talked about this, there's a need, I think, for studios to really just lean on known IP in the four quadrants you're trying to get as many asses in the seats as possible. And with that, we've seen, unfortunately, a little bit of a diluting of maybe riskier filmmakers, at least with larger budgets that are the auteurs that we've talked about, people that have such a unique signature, whether it's visual or thematic, and that those films then make it to a big screen in wide variety. And this is to say tons of great filmmakers out there that are unique, that are auteurs. They just usually are not in the AMC that's local to me. They'll hit up streaming or they'll be in indie cinemas, but they may not get a release as a lot of Robert Eggers films have, because he seems to have, by virtue of the movies he's done and his approach and his appeal to audiences, seem to almost go somewhere in between, where he's not, I don't think we're going to see like Robert Eggers' Avengers movie anytime soon, but there's still a fact that, yeah, like his movies do play in the multiplexes, and Nosferatu to the point that it got a Christmas Day release, which is set aside for big name movies when they know that they will have many asses in seats. So there's something to be said about not only Robert Eggers doing an adaptation of Nosferatu, but the fact that it was made for a large audience, and that Pete, you were one of the people in that audience.
Yeah, it's a Christmas movie, literally. Which is more Christmas movie, Die Hard or Nosferatu? Yeah, no, I did see it. I really enjoyed the 2024 version, and I'll probably speak more in broad strokes, because I would say Robert Eggers, known obviously for his verisimilitude and his attention to detail. The 2024 version is just an absolutely gorgeous film, just from shot selection. There's the homages. There's a lot of the archways that you saw with Murnau that he harkens back to. I believe like the set for the town of Visburg was 6 city blocks long that they recreated they wanted to use as little CGI as possible.
A backlot spanning 6 city blocks, candlelit sequences, and plenty of fog, evoking his own haunted memories.
It's shot on film, also makes it feel a little older. And then the scenes that take place with moonlight are almost black and white. Our eyes in moonlight actually see close to black and white. And so that's what we were trying to replicate.
I'd say it shifts like the original. I don't know if it necessarily has a focus on a specific character, and Herzog focuses more on Dracula and his plight. This one definitely squares it on Ellen, played by Lily Rose Depp in this one. So now we're back Ellen to Mina, back to Ellen in this one. He uses the original's names for the most part.
I have wrestled with the devil as Jacob wrestled the angel in Peniel, and I tell you, if we are to tame darkness, we must first face that it exists.
Willem Dafoe's character, who's essentially the stand-in for Van Helsing, is the new character in terms of name. He's Professor Von France. He's more of a man that's into, or more in tune with the occult. He's the only one that really believes Ellen. And yeah, it's really her journey. I'd say it's probably the horniest of the three, for sure. It definitely explores a lot of the sexual repression in Ellen's character. And that's what is subtext in the original is very much the text in the 2024 version.
I want to know for you, what was it about Nosferatu that made you want to adapt that rather than tell a traditional Dracula story?
I mean, I as much as I love the novel, it is a little bit overstuffed with Victoriana, and I think something about the Murnau adaptation is just a simple fairy tale, and I actually think that simple fairy tale that is at the core of the Stoker novel is the thing that has made it like so adaptable and so versatile and kept people so inspired over the past century. And something that I really loved about the Murnau film is that it ends with the female protagonist being the heroine, and I thought that it would be like potentially more exciting if the whole film is told through her eyes, because it had the potential to be more like emotionally and psychologically complex than an adventure story about a real estate agent, and as much as it is like a scary horror movie, and it is, there's even jump scares, like it is a gothic romance, and it's a tale of love and a tale of obsession, and through her eyes I think we can really like get into that mode more, without it becoming like the tragic anti-hero story of a lovelorn vampire, which I'm also less interested in.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so she essentially makes like a psychic pact when she's younger with Nosferatu. She's calling out to the darkness. She feels a darkness in herself that's very much, you could talk about being her own sexually repressed self. She loves her husband, Thomas, but there's definitely, as we've explored and talked about, there's a disconnect there. There's a side of her that he just cannot connect to. And she finds this connection with Nosferatu, and in Nosferatu's eyes, like, she's made a pact and she must come to him, and all the beats start to feel familiar. There's not a whole lot different going on, like from the terms of story and plot. But then when Nosferatu, played brilliantly by Bill Skarsgård, again, just disappears into the makeup. His voice, I heard that he had done a lot of training with an opera vocal coach. Like, his voice is otherworldly, and apparently no audio enhancements. That is entirely his voice in the film.
During the most irregular dreams, I fear I am taken ill.
It is a black omen to journey in poor health. You will remain and well rest yourself.
I must object, my lord.
You will obey this my counsel.
But, my lord... Count?
Just the way that he speaks and pronounces, and again, that goes back to Eggers wanted that attention to detail. Like, Orlok in this one is, I think, less a force of nature than really just a decomposing, undead Romanian lord. And that's how he is played. When you finally do see him in full, it's very grotesque. There's not a lot of beauty there. In fact, there's no beauty there. But again, like Michelle, what you were talking about in the 79 version, Ellen, there's a connection, and there's still a draw between the two of them. And I think at one point he says something to her, or she says, "You cannot love," and he's, "I cannot, but yet I cannot be sated without you." He is obsessed with her, and he takes advantage of her. And when she, of course, is, because it's a period piece, is, "Oh, you're just hysterical, and these things will pass, and you just need to do this, and everything will be fine, and don't worry about it." But she, she knows herself, and she knows that darkness within her. It's there. And I think by the end, she has come to terms with that, and she doesn't feel shame for it. But again, it's thrust upon her to be the person to rid the town of this evil that has descended upon it.
This cast is incredible. But speaking of Lily Rose, can you talk about finding her and what makes her so perfect for that?
I mean, after my first meeting with her, I kind of knew she was the one. She just had a kind of sensitivity to the character. She understood it so deeply. Like when we were talking about the script, she'd seen all these versions of Dracula. She'd seen the kind of art house movies that I was thinking about, and would have suggested to her, but she'd already seen them and brought them up herself in relation to what this was. And then she did this audition that was just as raw and powerful and ferocious as the stuff that she does on screen. And it was indisputable.
I'm trying to think of any other little quirks and stuff, but we've talked about a lot of the themes are there. Like I said, some of the stuff that Eggers does in this just brings more of that to the forefront. I want to say it's an over 2-hour film. You talk about Herzog filling in some of the gaps from the original. Those get filled in even more in Eggers' version. A lot of characters get more time to breathe. It felt very much like watching a play. The dialogue and just the way that he was framing up shots with people in the frame, it almost felt like I was watching a stage play at parts, which I found really interesting, and just led more, just because, again, it's so gorgeous to look at. And there's just some incredible shots of the night shots of when Thomas is first making his way to Orlok's castle, and he's in the middle of the forest, and there's a crossroads that he's at, and the carriage appears, and it almost looks like an upside down crucifix at one point, just because of the lighting of the moon behind him, and just some really gorgeous shots. And it's a beautiful film to look at.
When Hutter, the sort of romantic male lead, threw open the lid of the sarcophagus in the Murnau film, that was a jump scare in 1922. And while there were horror movies before Nosferatu very much invented horror films. So my film is in conversation both with that movie, but also horror history.
Those of you out there listening have made it this far. I think you owe it to yourself to check out this version as well. I would certainly not put it above the original, and I'll have to watch the Herzog one again to see where I stand on that one now. It has some issues. It's probably a little too long. There's some stuff there that I think probably could easily have been cut without losing any of the beats of the story. But if you enjoy what Robert Eggers does with stuff from like The Witch and The Lighthouse, then you're going to be drawn into this world as well. So that's my broad strokes.
Is it also set in Northern Europe?
It is, yes. Yeah, it's Visburg again. So yeah, it's a German. Yeah, it takes place in German city.
And one of the things I heard, Pete, is that in one of Eggers' interviews, he was talking about how he felt like for a modern day audience, he almost had to explain a few things, like you were talking about, fill in some of the gaps a bit more from the 1922 version, because he felt audiences wouldn't be as accepting. And I thought one of the things he brought up that would be in the film is that the Thomas Hutter character, the Jonathan Harker type character, the reason he's willing to go essentially to the middle of nowhere to meet Count Orlok / Dracula is because he's in debt. And when I heard that, I was like, oh, that's a very simple but rational explanation for a modern day audience to say, oh, this is insane. This is ridiculous. This is otherworldly. Who would put themselves through this? Oh, someone who is a bit desperate, who's in debt and might be willing to do something or compromise themselves a little bit in also put their safety at risk in order to do that. So that makes sense. And also didn't feel like too far of a leap in the same ways you were talking about with Ellen Hutter. There's more of a connection to the spiritual as much as there is a connection to the maybe sexual needs that are not being met, let alone emotional needs. And calling out to Orlok now makes sense. Because you called me, I came, but also we're satisfying needs that we both have. Those two things just feel like explanations that were made for the modern film that make sense.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, specifically with Nicholas Holt's character as Thomas. Yes, he very much loves his wife as much as they have that they have that area that they just can't connect on. But he very much loves Ellen, and he's looking at this as his opportunity to provide for her. They want to get a house. I think they're renting or they're living with their friends. So it's Friedrich Harding, and his wife Anna, Aaron Taylor Johnson's character. Thomas is looking to get out of that situation. He wants a place for themselves that they can start a family and start being productive members of society. He's working for Knock, who, again, Eggers, whereas in the original, there's no subtlety. You know that he's crazy and is doing the bidding of Orlok from the get-go, just from the crazed look and the makeup and his reactions. He's got the occult paper that he's looking over. He's introduced as more of on the level, he's Thomas's boss, and here's an opportunity for you. You need to go. You have to go now. And Thomas looks at this as, oh, well, I'm going to be very well compensated. Yes, I'm going to be gone for a long time. I have to travel to the Carpathian Mountains to do this deal, but this is what it's going to get me. So yes, to your point, he colors in that a little bit more that I think a modern audience is going to look at that and be like, oh, that makes perfect sense. Of course, you're going to do this. It's a sacrifice. It's a sacrifice that most people would probably make. And so, there's things that color in the story that he adds to that, yes, I think for a modern audience makes this a very accessible film, certainly for Robert Eggers, for sure.
In the Herzog version, Parker does say that he's doing it because he wants to get a bigger house for his wife.
Okay. Yeah, there you go.
While in the 1922, there isn't really an overture of why he's going other than the fact that he could make a lot of money, but it's definitely subtle.
All very tangible, realistic motivations for characters, especially in 100 years later, where we have the language of cinema to lean on. Like, we are the beneficiaries of seeing so many movies. And an audience in 1922 had very little. They had more of a literary connection. Maybe they saw a few stage plays. Then you get to 1979, and now there's inertia, cinematic inertia. We've seen things, we've seen themes, we've seen templates. We know how things should go. And now audiences are smart. And I think that's probably to Eggers' benefit that he's understanding there's an audience that has seen a version of the story before. I better catch them before they start questioning my film, because I'm going to take this to places that they might find ridiculous, but I need them to stick around for the ride. So if I can shoot down any hesitation or any doubts, why would that character do that? Oh, because of this. Oh, okay, that makes sense. I too rent, and I too would like to move on to maybe buy my own home. So that's a motivation I can relate to.
For fans of the genre, I hope that, you know, it connects with them and it both feels new and also somehow cozy.
It feels like that with, I remember at one point, I think it was the Robert Downey Jr. version of Sherlock Holmes, and that with a lot of public domain characters, Sherlock Holmes, Zorro, Dracula, Frankenstein, and they almost need to be reinvented for every generation. The successful ones, the ones that sort of float to the top, their buoyancy is really made of speaking to that generation's needs and wants and desire. So you might have a Sherlock Holmes that has more martial arts and is more kinetic and maybe a little less deduction and a little bit more shootouts. All right, maybe that's what some audiences want. And then you get something like the Benedict Cumberbatch version of Sherlock Holmes that seems to find a balance between modern technology and also still a nod to the great detective that is Sherlock Holmes. And it feels like Eggers, in his version, Pete, was able to as much try to make it pretty modern. So give it a shot. And it's still a reinvention of that shadowy silhouetted figure, just updated for a modern audience.
Yeah, for sure. And from everything that I've heard and read about Robert Eggers, he's a careful guy when it comes to that. He would have thought through a lot of this stuff because he's not one to leave a lot of details on the floor when he's making his films.
There is a lot of hubris in trying to do Nosferatu, which was something that I was struggling with from the beginning. Like, do I have the right to do this? You know, it was emotional to finally do it. So it was pretty incredible.
I think this version, the 2024 version, where I think you could say the first two were very much looking at societal trauma, especially when you think of the filmmakers that made those films coming from Germany post-World War I, post-pandemic. Herzog, I think, trying to still grapple with Germany coming out of the ashes of World War II and how they rebuild themselves as a society after all that. I think Eggers definitely goes more personal trauma route with this. This is, I think, saying less about society, maybe on some level from the sexual standpoint, but this is more like personal trauma stuff that is dealing more on the very much human, personal level than I think the other two were. And I'd be remiss if I didn't talk or just mention the sound design in this movie is phenomenal. Orlok's voice, aside from being otherworldly, like it struck me as like a person or vampire being that was struggling to remember how to speak in the way that he delivers his lines. And then just the sucking of the blood is just, it's unnerving, the sound design of that. And the way that his choice was to have Orlok suck the blood directly from the heart. I think there's a lot to be mined there, and I'm still processing what I saw from the film, so I'll probably down the road have more to say about it. Like with the 1922 and the 1979 version, I think there's going to be a lot there for people to, I hate to do it, but I'm going to do it, sink their teeth into over the years.